Hello, everyone. I'm Kate Baldwin. Thanks so much for joining me. A partial reversal from Israel and now a rejection. Democratic Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, she is now saying that she will not visit the West Bank under the conditions set by Israel. The Israeli government had reversed themselves just this morning to say that they would agree to let the Michigan Democrat visit her grandmother in the West Bank. Tlaib now says that she is not going anywhere, putting out a statement on Twitter saying this: I've decided that visiting my grandmother under these oppressive conditions stand against everything I believe in, fighting against racism, oppression, and injustice. All of this comes one day after Israel banned both Congresswoman Tlaib and her colleague Ilhan Omar from entering the country at all. They're the first and only Muslim women in Congress, and they are vocal critics of Israel and have supported the boycott movement against Israel known as BDS. And don't forget, this isn't just a spat between members of Congress and a U.S. ally, which is important regardless. This also comes after President Trump got involved publicly and privately, we're told, pushing the Israeli government not to let them in. CNN's Oren Lieberman, he's joining us from Jerusalem. He's been following all of these twists and turns, and a lot of it's just happening this morning. Oren, what are you hearing there now?
Well, as of right now, Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, who was granted access for a humanitarian visit to Israel and the Palestinian territories to see her family, including her 90-year-old grandmother, she said it might be the last time she's able to see her. She has rejected that visit. The day started with Israel denying access from yesterday to these two congresswomen, Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, as you point out, two of the most vocal critics of Israel in Congress. Israel denying them access, first because they are supporters of a boycott against Israel, and second because President Donald Trump essentially forced Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's hand in a tweet saying Israel would show great weakness if it let them in, and that's what Netanyahu followed through on, denying them access. But Israel left a window open there, saying if they want to come on a humanitarian visit, that is, if Tlaib wants to come, she would be allowed to do so. And that permission was granted this morning or early into this afternoon. And it looked like she would accept, that she would have made a visit over the weekend and into early next week, until just a couple of hours ago she said she would not come under the restrictions set by the Israelis, under a solely humanitarian visit where she had promised not to take any actions that would be seen or would be a boycott against Israel. And that, by the way, is an action supported by her family here. We spoke with them a short time ago, and her uncle says they didn't accept these conditions either for her visit.
We are against the conditional visit of Rashida to Palestine. Rashida has the right to visit Palestine as a Palestinian, regardless of being a congresswoman, as any citizen with a U.S. passport has the right to come and visit their family without any conditions or pressure.
We already knew that there was domestic politics involved here. Congresswomen Tlaib and Omar are two of the favorite targets of President Donald Trump, but now there's Israeli politics involved as well. After Tlaib said she would not come under the conditions set by the Israelis, the Israeli interior minister, who has the final say here, took a swipe at her and said it seems that her hatred of Israel overcomes her love of her grandmother. Kate.
This is getting nasty, I guess if that should surprise anybody. Oren, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I wonder where this goes from here. Let's find out. Joining me right now, Democratic Congressman Brad Schneider. He's of Illinois. He helped lead the recent move in the House of Representatives to condemn the BDS movement that Tlaib and Omar support that is wrapped up in all of this. Congressman, thank you for being here.
Kate, thanks for having me.
You called the Prime Minister's decision, the government's decision to block both of these members of Congress short-sighted and wrong. That was like a hot second ago, and now we have these twists and turns. Now you're looking at something of a reversal, but with restrictions on Tlaib, and she's now refusing to go under those circumstances as Oren laid out. What's your reaction this morning?
Well, I think the decision that Congresswoman Tlaib is making is a personal decision, so I'll leave that to her and her family. But I did say yesterday that the Prime Minister's decision to deny entry to both Congresswoman Tlaib and Omar was wrong and short-sighted because they're missing the broader point. As members of Congress, when we have the opportunity to go to Israel or to any country, it's an opportunity to see and learn. I've been to Israel more times than I can count. I've never returned from any of those trips without having more questions coming home than I started with going there. And so I think this was a missed opportunity, a wrong decision. And it's a challenge to the strong bipartisan support for Israel we've seen in Congress. Just last month, I led the effort, as you mentioned. We had 398 members of Congress vote to support the U.S.-Israel relationship, commit to Israel's security, and condemn the BDS movement.
You don't agree with Tlaib, and Omar, quite frankly, on the issue of Israel, basically at all. But would you recommend that she go through with the visit after Israel is telling her that essentially she can't speak out while there? I mean, would you agree to the conditions like this if circumstances were different?
Again, I think that's a personal decision. I know for me personally, I would want to see my grandmother. But that's for her to make her own decision with her family, like I said. I wish that the Israeli government
they're going into, they're looking to enter, a democratic government, a democratic country in the Middle East. Israel is a democracy, and they're looking to go there. And do you think it's okay that the Israeli government put restrictions on their speech of a U.S. member of Congress?
No, and I said this yesterday. I think that they should be allowed to enter Israel, to tour Israel. Again, I just came back last week from Israel.
Right.
We visited not just Jerusalem, but we went to Ramallah. We spoke with President Abbas. We spoke with Prime Minister Netanyahu. But we also spoke with the leader of the opposition, Benny Gantz. We went to the Gaza border. We visited Lebanon border, Syria border. We spoke with Palestinians and Israelis. We saw Israel in many of its facets. And I think it's important to go to any situation and see as much of the picture as possible. But I also think it's important, and this is just my style, is to try to build bridges. For long before I got to Congress, the effort to try to bring peace between Israelis and Palestinians, to work towards ultimately the possibility of a two-state solution. The reason BDS, I believe, is anti-Semitic is because it denies the Jewish aspiration for a homeland of their own. But the Palestinians have a similar aspiration. The path to peace, I believe, is through negotiations between the two parties. And the role the United States should be playing is to help create the forum for those parties to come together. And the strength that Israel finds in many ways is because of the support they get, bipartisan support in the United States Congress. And this is why I'm so critical of our president, Trump, trying to use Israel as a wedge issue, trying to break away support among Democrats. I don't think we'll be successful.
I want to ask you,
but I think we're in an unfortunate situation.
I want to ask you about the president's involvement here. But first, I don't know, another way of asking this is, who is more wrong here? Israel's position in this, or Rashida Tlaib in now refusing to go under those circumstances?
I think that's the wrong frame. I think Congresswoman Tlaib's positions on Israel are wrong. I have said that. I've talked to her about it. I think she has a narrative, but I don't think she's looked at the broader perspective. Like I said, I believe the path to peace is for two states, for two peoples. I'm committed to that and work towards it. That's why that resolution last month was so important. But I've also said that I believe the decision by Prime Minister Netanyahu not to let them in was both wrong and short-sighted. And what I hope is we can find a path and the Israel government will change its position. I think it would be good for all of my colleagues to visit Israel, to see the situation from all sides and understand why Israel is such an important ally for security as we fight Hamas and Hezbollah, an ally for economics. And the more you see, the more you learn, the more you know.
That is a great point. Let me read you how the New York Times put it in terms of the President Trump's role here this morning. By enlisting a foreign power to take action against two American citizens, let alone elected members of Congress, Mr. Trump crossed a line that other presidents have not, in effect exporting his partisan battles beyond the country's borders. What do you think the real impact of the president's role here, the president's words, both publicly and privately?
Well, I think so much of what this president is doing is crossing lines and having a negative impact, especially on the global stage. I say all the time that the world is a better place and America is more secure when we lean in, when we lead. I think the president's view is the opposite of that, trying to pull us away. I grew up at a time where there was a philosophy that our politics ended at the nation's shore, and when we were overseas, we spoke as one nation, one country that has an interest in the world. The president's interests are different. I think it's unfortunate that he interjected himself into the situation with this visit, into the politics in Israel, and I pray and will continue to work that this president's unable to try to create a partisan divide on support for Israel in the United States Congress. There are not a lot of issues where we can get 398 members to speak out in unison in one voice.
That's very true. Congressman Schneider, thank you for coming in.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Oh, thanks so much. Turning to some breaking news this morning, a tense and unsettling situation unfolding when New York police were called to the scene after reports of suspicious devices were being left on a subway platform. Police determined that they were not dangerous, but they are investigating why 2 rice cookers were left on a subway platform and if they're connected to an identical item found later. Let's go to the scene. CNN correspondent Polo Sandoval is there in downtown Manhattan. Polo, what are you learning there?
Three rice cookers, Kate. 2 of them were actually found in the subway complex that you see behind me. Still roped off right now as the investigation essentially wrapping up here. And another one just uptown, but police telling us that all were checked out. All of them deemed to be harmless, and in fact, they were empty. So now the question really becomes who put them there and why. And investigators do have a lead. Just a short while ago, the NYPD essentially tweeting a photograph of someone that they describe a person of interest. This was surveillance video shot at the station that we're at this morning, essentially showing a white male in his 20s or 30s, according to investigators, the police want to speak to. At this point, they don't know exactly what the motive would have been here, if it was simply dropped there accidentally, or if it was done intentionally to cause this kind of scare. I should tell you, Kate, that this was certainly equaled or certainly led up to some tense moments for many and really a lot of headaches for many New Yorkers who were just trying to get to work this morning. This is one of the busiest subway stations in Manhattan. So the concern here is, did this person of interest potentially put those items there to cause this scare? This station had to be evacuated. We know of at least 2 trains that had to be evacuated as well. So investigators want not only police to be aware of who this individual is, but also the viewers as well, since of course they're very much aware that the whole New York transit system could potentially be a target. And today was a reminder.
Yeah, and of course, a rice cooker is different than a pressure cooker, but the way they look is very similar to kind of the layman, if you will. And when you think of pressure cooker, you think of the Boston Marathon bombings, and that is where, memories, why folks were so quickly concerned about it. Fortunately, harmless this morning. Polo, thank you. Really appreciate it. Right. Coming up, President Trump has an ambitious idea. Buy Greenland, the entire island. He's not the first president to ask that, though. What Greenland has to say about it, that's ahead. Plus, in public, President Trump is nothing but confident about the strength of the U.S. economy. Behind closed doors, we're learning
I look at the real estate. I'm always looking at the real estate. I don't know. I'll never get it out of my blood.
Reports are President Trump has a new piece of real estate on his mind. This time, it isn't a skyscraper. It isn't even a golf course, but rather an entire country, Greenland. CNN has learned from sources that President Trump has on multiple occasions floated the idea of buying the island from the Danish government, even so far as getting the White House counsel's office to look into the possibility. CNN's Fred Pleitgen has more from Greenland.
Folks in the very beautiful territory of Greenland don't seem that interested in President Trump's alleged idea to buy this place. The official government of the semi-autonomous region said, quote, Greenland is not for sale. They did say that they were willing to conduct cooperation between what they call equal countries. Now, local residents that we spoke to here in the small village of Kulusuk said the Americans tried to acquire Greenland in 1867 and in World War II, and they failed. And one resident said it will not happen. There are some reasons why America might want to have Greenland. It certainly does seem to have a lot of natural resources, and the Chinese have been trying to get in on that business. And it's not really something that the U.S. really likes seeing, with China trying to get a lot of that business here. Also, the U.S., of course, has a big military base here in Greenland as well, the Thule military base. So there are some good reasons why the U.S. might want Greenland. However, if these natural resources really become exploitable here in Greenland, certainly the folks here would probably want autonomy, full autonomy and independence, rather than becoming part of the United States. One of the things that President Trump would probably have to do if he were to acquire Greenland is finally acknowledge that climate change is real, because Greenland, with its giant ice sheet, is certainly on the front line in the battle against climate change. Fred Pleitgen, CNN, Kulusuk, Greenland.
Fred, thank you so much. So the possibility of Trump's interest in buying Greenland was first reported by the Wall Street Journal. And joining me now is one of the Wall Street Journal reporters who broke this story, Vivian Salama. Thanks so much for being here, Vivian.
Hi, Kate.
How serious are you told that President Trump really is about this?
So there's always a caveat, right? I've been covering this administration since President Trump took office, and
right.
He's the most unpredictable president that I've known in my lifetime, at least. And so it's really hard to say what he'll do. Most of the sources that we spoke to, my team and I who worked on the story, said that there were varying degrees of seriousness when it came to it. Sometimes he was really curious about the possibilities of it, as Fred mentioned. And as we determined, he asked White House counsel to look into it. He's asked advisors numerous times about it. But sometimes he just kind of says it, when we buy Greenland, everything is going to be greater. He'll use these sort of passing jokey references to it. But all we know, and, I had originally gotten the tip, is that it comes up in conversation constantly because it's something that's always on his mind. And that's how the original source told it to me, is like the president just frequently references this desire of his to buy Greenland. And so no one really thinks it's imminent. No one thinks it's going to happen. But then again, he's going to Denmark next month, and he might surprise us and bring it up. So who knows?
Yeah, the timing of this is also fascinating. And while, look, it sounds out there. Yes, you do remind people, though, in your piece that the United States has tried twice before to purchase the island. I mean, do your sources know? Was it one thing that sparked President Trump's interest here? I mean, why does he want Greenland?
I mean, there were also varying stories as to where this idea came from, who planted it in his head in the first place. One person told us that he was at a round table and someone told him that Denmark was actually having financial trouble because it provides subsidies to Greenland. I mean, Denmark is a big reason why Greenland kind of functions, its economy functions. Otherwise, it would be a really poor country. And so someone said, you should help them out. You should take it off their hands. And he started to ask around, can I do that? Greenland has also come up numerous times as far as any kind of military or national security strategy in the Arctic, as far as confronting China and Russia and their ambitions in the region. And so it gets the wheels turning in his head whenever those stories come up. And so obviously it's something that has been considered. And just as you pointed out rightly, it has been done. And this was something that was really surprising over the course of our reporting this story. When we first heard it, we were kind of laughing about it. And then the more we started to research for this, we were like, hold on, maybe this isn't so off the wall. And a big reason that the U.S. went to buy it in 1946, right after World War II, was that they wanted to, pursue this possible Arctic exploration. And in exchange, though, there was a quid pro quo for Denmark. They were going to give Denmark a chunk of Alaska. In those days, they were going to give Denmark $100 million and a chunk of Alaska to let them do some oil exploration in Alaska, and the U.S. in turn would take Greenland. And so I don't think any of that is going to happen or anything even similar to that. So we're probably a long way from, any of that's happening.
Yeah.
And also there's the minor point that the people in Greenland would probably have a say in the matter. And it doesn't
minor point that Greenland says Greenland's not for sale. Also, right.
Greenland is not for sale. And I think the U.S. Congress would also have to have a say in it. And I don't think that they're too keen either. So we'll wait and see.
I did read that portion of your reporting 3 times being like, really? Really? They tried to, this has come up twice before? I was fascinated by it. Thanks for bringing it to us, Vivian. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Coming up, there's a new measure this morning on the state of the 2020 race, showing Senator Elizabeth Warren is on the rise, making some big strides. It also shows some big red flags for President Trump. That is next. On the rise, Democratic presidential candidate Senator Elizabeth Warren making big gains in a new Fox News national poll, while Joe Biden still remains in the lead with 31% support among Democratic voters, Democratic primary voters. But Warren is now at 20% support, a big improvement in the 3 successive polls by Fox since March, when back then she was at 4%. And as one goes up, another must go down. And that very clearly, when it comes to Warren, is Bernie Sanders. Sanders now at 10% support nationally. So what are voters in the key early states saying about this, about Elizabeth Warren? What do they like? Why are they then still so concerned? Joining me right now, CNN political analyst and national correspondent for the New York Times, Jonathan Martin. It's great to see you, Jonathan. You took a deep dive kind of into the conversation about Elizabeth Warren, what voters don't like, what they're talking about in the key states of Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina. Very different places, very different Democratic voters. Was there consensus among them of what they like about Warren first, as we see her steady growth in the polls?
Yes, there's definitely consensus about what they like, which is she's got a plan, which is her catchphrase. They can't always name all the plans, but they like that she has plans. And more to the point, they like the fact that she is a sharp, articulate, and obviously very intelligent candidate. That's the consensus of what they like about her. Now, there's oftentimes a concern that's articulated immediately after what they like about her, and oftentimes that concern revolves around,
that's what I want you to get to. Let me read that bit, because I think at least some of it from your piece, because this is quite interesting.
Sure.
It says, you write, these Democrats worry that her uncompromising liberalism would alienate moderates in battleground states who are otherwise willing to oppose the president. Many fear Ms. Warren's past claims of Native American ancestry would allow Mr. Trump to drown out her policy message with his attacks and slurs against her. And you also write, and there are Democrats who, chastened by Hillary Clinton's defeat in 2016, believe that a woman cannot win in 2020. Really?
Yeah. Yeah, it's striking over the course of a couple of months this summer, Kate, talking to voters, not just at Warren events, but events for other candidates in Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina, just how often you hear the same themes. And invariably, those are the three issues that come up, sometimes together, sometimes in isolation. It's what is she going to say when Trump calls her Pocahontas, because that's going to drown out her broader policy message. And I think, having seen what Trump did in 2016, both to the Republicans and Hillary, with the nicknames and the attacks, that does cause some fear. Then I think among the moderate Democrats, or even the more pragmatic progressives in the party, there is concern about running too far to the left in this country, given that the key states that you have to get 270 tend to be more middle-of-the-road states, Wisconsin's, Michigan's of the world. But then you do hear, and by the way, Kate, you often hear it from women, not men. They'll say it bluntly, that they have PTSD from 2016 and that they are just skeptical to the point of being cynical about where the country is now on gender. And they simply say, 2016 proved that we are not ready for a female president, and we just have to play it safe this time around. You hear it time and time again.
Honestly, it almost sounds like folks, a lot of these voters don't need to hear more because of the concerns that they've laid out. They know about Elizabeth Warren. It almost seems like that is what one of I don't know if it's a red flag for Elizabeth Warren, but it was one thing that really jumped out to me from your conversations with folks.
Yeah, and look, I think some of this she can actually overcome. She's a very talented political athlete, and especially for somebody who only got into politics fairly late in life. She ran for the first time in 2012 for the U.S. Senate. And I think she's had two good debate performances. And I talked to her actually last week in Iowa about this, and she said, look, the way that you overcome this is by success. And I think more debate performances could allay these fears. And then once you get into the primary itself, Kate, I think if she does start winning states, if you win in Iowa or if you win in New Hampshire, that begets success. And so I think that could help her here assuage the concerns.
Yeah, David Chalian said to me about the whole question of electability. How do you judge electability? People think you're electable once you've won something. So if you do well in Iowa, then that obviously that can snowball in a good way for you. It's great to see you.
There is very much something to that.
Yeah,
and just real fast, by the way, more than any recent primary, just the phrase electability or viability comes up so often, Kate. It's remarkable how much Democrats are looking at this election through the prism of not who do I like, who has the best agenda, but who can win. We hear it time and time again out there on the trail.
Great to see you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kate.
After a wild week of growing fears of a coming recession, President Trump is reportedly rattled over the U.S. economy. More concerned for sure than he's letting on publicly. What is the White House planning to do about it?
The United States right now has the hottest economy anywhere in the world. But you have no choice but to vote for me because your 401ks, down the tubes, everything's going to be down the tubes. So whether you love me or hate me, you got to vote for me.
That was President Trump last night at a rally with supporters touting his confidence in the economy and very clearly banking his entire re-election on it. But new reporting from the Washington Post describes that behind the scenes, President Trump is far less confident about the state of the economy right now. Quote, privately, however, the president has sounded anxious and apprehensive. One Republican telling the Post that the president is, quote unquote, rattled. Should he be? What's the administration planning to do about it? Joining me right now is Gene Sperling. He's the former director of the National Economic Council under President Obama and Clinton. Gene, it's good to see you. You just heard President Trump there. What do you say to that?
Well, I think sometimes President Trump doesn't always quite speak the truth, and there's times I think he says the opposite of the truth he's thinking. And I think the opposite of that is his concern, I think rightfully, that even the people who like him are going to now think they should vote against him because they have now watched this type of economic narcissism, this kind of erratic steps in tweeting. I've called it, drunk driving type of economic management that they see can be harmful. I mean, yes, Donald Trump is good at inheriting. He was good at inheriting wealth, and he was good at inheriting an economy that was moving in the right directions in many ways. But let's not overdo that. Job growth is actually lower under his watch than Obama. The China trade deficit is worse under his watch than under President Obama. And I think you're now starting to see that this kind of recklessness ends up both having self-inflicted wounds on the U.S. and hurts the global economy in ways that hurts us. So, if you're an agriculture exporter, you're looking at terrible numbers. Agriculture exports cut in half. If you're a soybean farmer, you're not only devastated by the lack of exports, you're worried whether you'll be permanently replaced by Brazil. And I think the other thing which Donald Trump has a hard time understanding is that if you create opposite, he knows there are people out there who have liked him but are getting impatient with the economy. And now what he's fearing is that even some people who were driven to some of his perhaps rhetoric or this, the outsider stance he was trying to take are now saying enough is enough. This guy is too reckless to manage or help manage the U.S. and global economy. One thing we do know, right or wrong, every president gets to claim when the economy is doing well during their term.
We do know that, but I do want to read you something that also the Washington Post is reporting about the kind of the state of affairs on the economy at the White House. Administration officials are not actively planning for a recession because they do not believe one will occur, and they worry that making such plans would validate a negative narrative about the economy and precipitate a crash, according to people involved in internal discussions. I mean, you were the economic advisor to Obama and Clinton. Is that a position that you all took, not look at contingency plans or plan for if things could go south because it would look bad? I mean, this is what concerns me. When I use the drunk driving analogy, usually when people drive drunk, they don't get into an accident, but it dramatically increases the chance of something terrible happening, so you don't do that. Every time that you do something reckless or troublesome, it doesn't always hurt the economy, but it increases the chances something terrible would happen. You've got to take the economy seriously. Your signals, what you do, whether you're Democrat or Republican, there needs to be that sense of responsibility. And what we've seen is look at the last threat on China. I'm for being tougher on China, but this last threat was reckless. It's caused trouble. He's had to pull back and admit the tariffs actually do hurt U.S. consumers. It's not a type of serious policy. Having a huge $2 trillion deficit increase to give mostly corporations and high-income individuals tax cuts at a time the economy was doing fairly well was not a well-designed, well-targeted way to help long-term growth, and then to look at the kind of troubles that we're having and at least not have a plan, as they say, that when you're digging a hole, digging a ditch, stop digging, stop doing some of the reckless type of management, and then to not even be planning for the economic signal. I think it's exactly that type of lack of economic seriousness that is unique to this administration, and whether you like Democrat or Republican administrations in the past, there was a degree of professionalism coming from the top, coming from the Oval Office that you're just not seeing here. Gene, thanks for the time.
Thanks for having me.
Really appreciate it. It's been 25 years since Jeff Bezos started this thing called Amazon, selling books out of his garage. Amazon's rise has been phenomenal, and it is now developing technology that gets really personal. CNN's Poppy Harlow took a special look at the powerhouse company.
According to Bloomberg, Amazon is working on a wearable device that can read human emotions.
Voice profiles give you the ability to teach Alexa your voice.
Using a baseline of your biometrics.
Alexa, close the shades, please.
You know, are you depressed? Are you happy?
Alexa, what time is it?
Are you manic? Have you had a stroke and you don't realize it yet? Do you have early onset Parkinson's?
Alexa, turn the TV on.
These are all discoverable if there's a big enough database of your voice.
Be sure to catch Poppy's special report tonight, 9 Eastern, right here on CNN. We'll be right back.
Hey, Ted, our garage door is giving us some trouble. You guys know a good repairman?
Actually, we do.
Perfect. Get us multiple quotes, check all the reviews, and then book the best one for Tuesday.
You can't expect your neighbors to do everything HomeAdvisor can. So just ask HomeAdvisor.
Got bugs in your house? Don't use traditional insecticides. Get Zevo.
Tonight on CNN.
In New Mexico, the number of deaths from a drug overdose there is nearly 4 times the national average. This week's CNN Hero is helping the children of families that are struggling with addiction. Take a look.
Many of our kids come to us traumatized. We create a healthy environment where young people can discover themselves and a way to contribute. Long neck, just find the length. When I see a child's face and spirit come to life, I don't need any more evidence. I know that that kind of joy is what will save them.
Story of Antonio Basco. Basco lost his wife in the mass shooting at the Walmart in El Paso 13 days ago. His wife, Margie Record, was his only family. Basco is now alone, and his grief has been met by an outpouring of support from the El Paso community and beyond. And when Basco offered an open invitation to anyone and everyone to join him for his wife's funeral today, even the funeral home was stunned by the overwhelming response. Hundreds are now expected to attend today as Basco prepares to say his final goodbye to Margie. CNN's Gary Tuckman has more.
Tony Basco loved only one person in the world. And now, she's gone.
And she loved you a lot.
I'll tell you what, I don't even know what you're seeing in me sometimes. But we had wonderful years. The best years of my whole life.
Tony has no other family. His wife, Margie Ricard, had just a few family members, but none in the El Paso area. Attendance at her funeral was expected to be minimal until the internet took over. Tweets from journalists and media outlets sent out messages of support for Tony. Then there was this Facebook post from the funeral home reading, Mr. Antonio Basco was married 22 years to his wife Margie Ricard. He had no other family. He welcomes anyone to attend his wife's services. People from all over the United States have contacted the funeral home, as well as Tony, to say they plan to attend Margie's funeral.
There are going to be hundreds of people here probably from all around the country. How does that make you feel?
I love it. I mean, it's nice to see people really caring about people. There's going to be a lot of people now. Tony was important.
They had been married for 22 years. Tony says his life had been very difficult prior to meeting her.
What would you like people to know about Margie?
She was a caring, loving, the most beautifulest person.
Every day now he goes to the memorial site next to the Walmart, taking exquisite care of Margie's memorial, making sure the flowers and the wind chimes, which she always loved so much, look the best they can.
Where did you meet her?
Omaha, Nebraska, in a bar.
And you were single? She was single?
Yeah. Never been.
And was it love at first sight?
Oh man, you couldn't imagine.
Tony is still waking up each morning in disbelief that she is gone.
I stood at my table looking at the front door, just waiting for her to walk in. I've even tried calling her on the phone.
You have?
I've tried to.
At the memorial site, Tony tells Margie that someday he will meet her in heaven.
So what you been up to? What you got to do up there? I wish you'd tell me something.
Tony is now beginning a new life alone. But for at least one day at Margie's funeral, he won't be.
She made me the happiest man in the world and the luckiest. There's nobody luckier than me in this whole world.
Gary Tuckman, CNN, El Paso, Texas.
And those funeral services are today. Ahead still for us, Democratic Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, she says she is, quote, being silenced and treated like a criminal. So she is now canceling a visit to Israel. Her reason and Israel's response ahead. It's political, social, and cultural change. And I'm not talking about just today. I'm talking about 50 years ago, when nearly 500,000 people came together in what became a magical moment to spread the message of peace and love at the Woodstock Music Festival. CNN's Bill Ware took a journey in the present through the past to explore what made Woodstock so epic in a new CNN special. This is so good, and you've only allowed me to see just a taste.
I'm just giving you a little taste. And Kate, I couldn't decide which shirt to wear today.
Really?
I figured if you're going to wear the tie-dye, I could go with this one, or I could go with this one.
Don't eat the...
Which do you think? I think this is more appropriate. But yeah,
for this show, for sure.
As you talked about, divided America, right? Could this happen again? That was sort of my animating mission statement. Like, why did what should have been a humanitarian disaster turn into this amazing symbol of human connection? And have we evolved past that right now?
Really amazing. Let's take a look at, well, and you get to interview one of my favoriteest people.
Yeah, so one of the things is I look at how many people are still together with peace, love, and music, and how many bands like Crosby, Stills, and Nash aren't talking to each other as a result of ego and greed and all that. And David Crosby, amazingly open, got to hang out with him. And here's a little, as he reflects, as many boomers do, on the end of the song. In this burst of creativity that you've had, you sing about death.
Stand up and face it.
Do you think about how you want to be remembered?
Not so much. The songs will do that. They're the best I can do. That's a weird thing. Everybody's scared to talk about it. The question is, what are you going to do with it? How do you spend that 2 weeks or that 10 years? And I got that figured out. Family, music.
Yeah, we got to get ourselves back to the God.
Because it's the only thing I can do.
He's on track to record 5 albums in 5 years. Somehow he survived, heroin and a Texas prison and 8 stents in his heart. But he's just one character that we found along the way that has, so there's 400,000 stories at Woodstock.
Did you find that a Woodstock could happen again?
I think it's really hard. Yeah. And I follow Michael Lang as he tried to make it happen again, as he tried to stage this massive concert, and paid $32 million up front to artists who in the end up kept it, and we got no concert. But it's all sort of I think it's a statement on where we've come, but the hope that we could hang on to.
Bill is such a storyteller, and he really does it justice this time. It's good stuff. Please watch it.